Have you ever studied another language and lived in another culture? If you have, how did you deal with misunderstanding and culture shock? Did you learn to laugh at yourself and your mistakes? I hope you did. My guest today has much to share about cross-cultural experiences. Father Jim Walters, SCJ, has ministered for many years among the Hispanics and the Native Americans. He will share with us the blessings and challenges of living and ministering cross-culturally. Father Jim, thank you very much for being here with us.
You're welcome.
You professed your vows with the priest of the Sacred Heart at the age of 19, and in the province you are known for your gift of languages. When did you start to learn about that gift of language?
Well, when I was in our high school seminary, we had the opportunity to study language. I studied Latin and French at that time. I enjoyed both very much. But I think where language became really important to me was when I saw the potential to serve in ministry because of my language background. When I entered our college program and eventually graduated from Loyola University in Chicago, I had majored in modern foreign languages, French and Italian. But I was being sent back to our high school seminary where I had previously been a student. It turned out that the Spanish teacher had resigned. So I was sent to Mexico to learn Spanish during the summer. It was at that point where I began to become more interested in language as a way of using it in ministry.
Did you experience culture shock while studying in Mexico?
Somewhat, yes. Yes, I did. I mean, just the whole experience of being my first time exposed to another culture. But one of the things that was a real blessing was that the people were so warm and welcoming when I moved from Hispanic ministry into ministry among the Dakota people in South Dakota.
Yes. And would you please tell us more about the culture shock that you experienced in South Dakota?
Well, you know, my approach to another culture was assuming that learning the language was a very good opportunity to reach out to the people, to understand them more deeply. And so by the time I went to South Dakota, I felt very fluent in Spanish and was very interested in learning the language of the people of South Dakota, the indigenous language. On the reservation, I began one of my first homilies by using a traditional greeting to the people. Shortly after the Mass, one of the members of the parish came up to me and said, "What are you trying to do? Are you trying to tell us how to be Indians?" And initially I was very hurt by that remark. I was very concerned because I thought it would have been acceptable for me to speak the language. And then the more I reflected on it and spoke to some of the people on the reservation, I realized that for over 100 years, this people had been forbidden by law to speak or learn their own language. And so for me, it was rather presumptuous to be at the pulpit using a language that my ancestors had oppressed people for trying to learn and speak. The other culture shock was that when I was working among Hispanic people, being a priest sort of put me in a position of great respect and esteem. It was not the same with Native Americans. In fact, I was told one time, "We don't care that you're a priest. We don't care what titles you hold or what background you have. We're concerned about who you are as a person." And those words really touched me very deeply. And so I often speak of my time in South Dakota as a 14-year retreat, because during that time, I discovered far more about myself as a person. And I think that both enriched my own personal growth and development, my spirituality, and who I am as a priest of the Sacred Heart today.
So you served for 14 years, 15 years as the director of the Hispanic Studies at Sacred Heart Seminary and School of Theology. Now, what did you uniquely bring to this position as a non-Hispanic person?
In the 15 years I served as director of Hispanic Studies, I would joke about it. I say, you know, I've been here all these years and no one has figured out that I'm not Hispanic. And initially, when I was asked to come to Sacred Heart Seminary and School of Theology, I kind of questioned why would they be asking me, even though I had years experience in Hispanic ministry not being Hispanic. And yet I realized that many of the seminarians and lay people that I would be working with were like me, non-Hispanic. And I could share with them some of my own experiences as a non-Hispanic and what I've learned, how it's enriched my life, and how it's gave me the opportunity to deeply respect the diversity of Hispanic cultures that I've been privileged to serve. I always joke in my first class in Spanish teaching, we teach here pastoral Spanish, Spanish that will be useful to seminarians as they prepare for priesthood. And I always tell them not to be afraid because it's so easy to say the wrong thing, but that people will laugh with us and see us as one like them, struggling to communicate cross-culturally. So I tell them the story of my first Mass in South Texas. I was doing fine. I had everything prepared, everything written down. And at the end of the Mass, I was handed the announcements, which were in English, and I had to spontaneously translate into Spanish. I wasn't prepared for this, of course. So I started translating, and I was, of course, nervous. Shortly after I finished with the announcements, gave the blessing and the dismissal, I noticed nobody would leave the church. And so I turned to someone I knew was bilingual, and I said, "What did I say?" And they said, "Well, Father, you know, you meant to say there's a man outside selling raffle tickets, but instead of using the word for raffle, you used the word for rifle. So people think that there's this sniper outside the church and no one wants to leave." And then I told the people, "I am so sorry. I feel so embarazado." It sounds like embarrassed in English, but in Spanish it means I feel so pregnant. And of course, all the people broke out laughing. Here I had been teaching the language for years. I had spoken the language frequently and thought of myself as relatively fluent. But in a very nervous moment, I blurted it out. And I said, I always felt that taught me a great deal of humility and also helped me to appreciate the people who come to our country and are struggling to learn a language and don't have the opportunity to learn it the way I'm learning languages. I learn them in safe environments, and I think that many of the people that have come to our nation have had to learn it on their own, and many times have been even beaten because they said the wrong thing and it was misinterpreted.
Ministry requires us to be present to the people. Mm-hmm. What have you learned about the people, and what have you learned about God?
I would say what I've learned about the people, and through the people, what I've learned about God is that there is a great deal of forgiveness and mercy. That the people have always been both generous and forgiving in receiving me. Even when I was struggling in South Dakota initially, I found that people were willing to reach out. Even when I made mistakes, and I made plenty of them, the people were always very forgiving. One of the things that's impressed me so much about the Lakota language is that there are no offensive curse words in Lakota.
Really? Oh, wow.
And the reason for that is the Lakota people always believed that language was a gift of God given to praise and thank God. You know, the worst thing you could call somebody if you're really angry at them is a turkey or a donkey or something like that, some animal. Understanding these things, how to give God praise through language.
Wow, that's
that, you know, that it's not just a matter of communicating with one another, but it's a way of speaking to God.
I'm glad to know. And did Sacred Heart spirituality help you in your ministry, shape the way you minister to the people?
Definitely, I would say. I think my understanding of our spirituality, of Priests of the Sacred Heart, has both impacted and enriched the way I minister to others. You know, we oftentimes talk about ourselves as prophets of love, servants of reconciliation. Particularly in a lot of my ministry, I have felt that reconciliation and that love very powerfully, not only in what I've given, but what I've received. So I've experienced the Sacred Heart speaking to me in the words and actions of other people with whom I've ministered.
As we come to the end of the conversation, do you have any suggestions on how to live and minister cross-culturally?
You know, a couple things I have always recommended to the seminarians that I teach is that we need to come with a sense of humility. We need to come with open ears and open hearts to learn from the people. I think one of the biggest dangers is that we come feeling that maybe because we've studied the language or we've read about the culture, that we know the people. It's easy to feel we understand the people, even in their own language, when they may be understanding something completely different. When we are afraid to ask or afraid to learn, we make a lot of mistakes. And sometimes we end up hurting and injuring relationships instead of building them.
So thank you very much, Father Jim, for your insights and for
welcome.
sharing with us your experiences. To me, it's very enriching. And so thank you very much for your ministry and being a role model for us younger SCJs. A nation's culture resides in the hearts and in the soul of its people, said Mahatma Gandhi. Learning and understanding cultures beyond our own can broaden our horizons and our respect for one another. Thank you for watching. Thank you for supporting the Priests of the Sacred Heart. You are in our prayers.